In the quiet border town of Vale Ashen, where the forests grew thick and the winters grew long, there lived a young woman named Lyra Nightshade. She was known to her neighbors as a quiet healer's helper, someone who kept to herself and rarely met anyone's eyes for too long. What no one knew, not even the few friends she had, was the secret she carried on her skin. Just below her collarbone, hidden beneath layers of cloth and years of careful habit, was a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. It was pale silver against her skin, delicate as a whisper, and according to old legends passed down through generations of wolf clans, it meant something no ordinary person could ignore. The mark was called the Sign of the Chosen. Stories said that only one person in a generation was born with it, and that person was destined to be the true mate of the Alpha King, the ruler of all the northern packs. Lyra had heard these stories as a child, sitting by the fire while her guardian, an old healer named Mira, spoke in hushed tones about fate and blood and duty. Even then, Lyra had felt a cold weight settle in her chest. She did not want to be chosen. She did not want a destiny that came with danger, or a title that came with war. Lyra had lost her parents when she was very young, in circumstances she barely remembered, and no one liked to explain. Mira had taken her in, raised her with quiet kindness, and taught her the ways of herbs and healing. But Mira had also taught her something else, something she repeated more often than any remedy. Never let anyone see your collarbone. Keep your sleeves high. Keep your collar higher. If the wrong eyes ever saw that mark, Mira warned, Lyra's peaceful life would end in an instant. So Lyra grew up guarded. She wore scarves even in the warmest months. She flinched away from anyone who reached too close to her shoulders. She built a life of small routines, tending to the sick, gathering herbs in the forest, and telling herself that maybe, if she was careful enough, the mark would remain her secret forever. Far to the north, in a stone fortress carved into the mountains, King Draven Ashvale ruled over the northern packs with a steady hand and a guarded heart. 6 years earlier, a betrayal within his own court had nearly cost him his throne and his life. Since then, Draven trusted almost no one. He had grown into a leader who valued strength and caution above all else, and he had long ago decided that old prophecies about fated mates were nothing more than stories told to control young rulers. He had watched too many men use the idea of destiny as a weapon. He preferred facts. He preferred what he could see with his own eyes. Lately, those eyes had seen something troubling. Reports had come to him of strange attacks along the southern border, near villages like Vale Ashen. Masked wolves, believed to serve a rival bloodline, had been raiding small settlements, searching for someone they called the Marked Girl. At first, Draven dismissed the reports as rumors, the kind of nonsense that spread when people were frightened and bored. But when 3 villages reported the same strange phrase, he decided to see the truth for himself. He arrived in Vale Ashen on a gray afternoon, dressed plainly to avoid drawing attention, though his presence still seemed to command the air around him. He walked through the marketplace, listening carefully, watching the townspeople go about their business. It was there, among the stalls of bread and cloth and dried herbs, that everything changed. The attack came suddenly. A group of masked wolves surged through the crowd, scattering vendors and knocking over baskets. Screams rose from every direction. In the chaos, Draven's sharp eyes caught sight of a young woman being dragged by 2 of the attackers toward the edge of the square. Her scarf had slipped from her shoulder, and she was fighting back with a strength that surprised him, twisting and striking at her captors with the desperation of someone who had learned long ago that no one was coming to save her. Draven moved before he could think. He crossed the square in seconds, cutting through the chaos with practiced ease. He struck down one attacker, then another, his movements precise and controlled despite the danger around him. The remaining wolves scattered, realizing too late who they had crossed. In the struggle, Lyra's cloak tore at the shoulder, and her collar slipped low enough to reveal the mark she had spent her whole life hiding. For a brief moment, in the fading afternoon light, the crescent shape on her collarbone seemed to glow with a faint silver shimmer. Draven froze. He had heard the old stories as a child, just as everyone had, but he had never truly believed he would see the mark himself. Yet there it was, unmistakable, glowing softly against her skin. Something in his chest shifted, a pull he could not explain, sudden and undeniable. It was not just recognition of a legend. It was something deeper, something instinctive, as if some quiet part of him had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Lyra noticed his stare, and immediately covered the mark with trembling hands, pulling her torn cloak back into place. Her breathing was ragged from the fight, but the fear in her eyes now had little to do with the attackers who had just fled. "You saw it," she said quietly, more accusation than question. Draven did not answer right away. He simply studied her, taking in the guarded set of her shoulders, the way she stood ready to run, even though the danger had passed. "You're safer with me than without me," he finally said. "Whoever sent those wolves knows what you carry. They will come again." "I never asked for this," Lyra said, her voice sharp with old frustration. "I never wanted any of it. The mark, the stories, the danger. I just wanted to live quietly." "I understand that better than you might think," Draven replied, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. There was no command in his voice, no expectation that she should be grateful or amazed to stand before a king. There was only quiet honesty. Word spread quickly through the town that the attackers had been driven off, and soon guards from Draven's personal escort arrived to secure the area. Lyra wanted to disappear into the crowd, to return to her small home, and pretend none of this had happened. But she knew, deep down, that the world she had carefully built around herself was already crumbling. Draven made her an offer that surprised her. He did not demand that she come with him as his intended mate, nor did he speak of duty or prophecy. Instead, he offered protection, plain and simple, until the source of the attacks could be found and stopped. "You are free to refuse," he told her. "I will not force a bond that means nothing if it isn't chosen. But I will not leave you here unprotected either." Lyra studied him for a long moment. Everything in her wanted to refuse, to hold on to the independence she had fought so hard to protect. But she had seen how skilled the wolves were, how determined they seemed. She thought of Mira, of the town, of the danger her presence might bring to people who had done nothing wrong. In the end, she agreed to travel with him, if only to keep others safe. The journey north was long, winding through forests and along quiet mountain roads. At first, Lyra kept her distance, speaking only when necessary, her guard raised as high as ever. But slowly, almost without meaning to, she began to notice things about the king that did not match the legends. He was patient with his soldiers, listening carefully to their concerns. He was quiet in the evenings, often staring into the fire with an expression that looked less like a ruler's confidence and more like exhaustion. He never pushed her to speak about the mark, never treated her like a prize to be claimed. One evening, as they made camp beside a quiet stream, Lyra finally broke the silence between them. "Why didn't you force the bond back in the square?" she asked. "Most in your position would have." Draven was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "Because I know what it feels like to have something taken from you in the name of destiny," he said. "My throne was nearly stolen by men who believed they had every right to it because of blood and old prophecy. I won't do the same to you. If this bond means anything, it should be something you choose, not something forced upon you by a mark on your skin." Lyra found herself studying him in a new light. She had expected a king obsessed with power, eager to use her for whatever advantage the mark might bring him. Instead, she saw a man who understood, in his own painful way, what it meant to be defined by something beyond his control. Their conversations grew longer after that night. Lyra spoke of her childhood, of Mira's teachings, of the years spent hiding beneath scarves and long sleeves. Draven spoke of the betrayal that had shaped him, of the loneliness that came with ruling a kingdom where trust was a luxury he could rarely afford. Neither of them had expected to find comfort in the other's presence, yet slowly, comfort was exactly what grew between them. Danger followed them still. As they approached the mountain pass leading to Draven's stronghold, the masked wolves struck again, more organized this time, clearly desperate to capture Lyra before she reached safety. The fight was fierce, echoing through the narrow pass as Draven's guards fought alongside him. Lyra, no longer content to stand aside and wait, joined the fight herself, using the quick reflexes and sharp instincts she had honed over years of caution and self-reliance. When one of the attackers lunged toward her from behind, Draven was there in an instant, pulling her out of harm's way and placing himself between her and the danger. As the last of the wolves fled into the trees, Draven turned to check on her, his hands steady on her shoulders, his eyes searching hers with open concern. In that moment, neither of them tried to hide what stood between them any longer. The pull they had both tried to ignore, to explain away as simple fate or coincidence, was something real, something built not just from a mark on her skin, but from days of honesty, patience, and quiet understanding. Once they reached the safety of Draven's stronghold, the truth behind the attacks finally came to light. A councilman within Draven's own court, hungry for influence and secretly allied with a rival bloodline, had been the one to leak word of Lyra's existence, hoping to use her capture as leverage against the throne. When the betrayal was uncovered, Draven dealt with it firmly, ensuring that his court would remember the price of treachery. With the danger finally behind her, Lyra found herself standing at a crossroads. She could return to Vale Ashen, to the quiet life she had once guarded so carefully, or she could stay, choosing a future she had never imagined for herself. She thought of the years spent hiding, the fear that had shaped so many of her choices, and she thought of the man who had never once tried to force her hand. On a clear evening, beneath a sky full of stars, Lyra stood before the gathered leaders of the northern packs, no longer hiding the mark on her collarbone. She let her collar fall open, allowing the crescent moon to catch the moonlight without shame or fear, for the first time in her life. Beside her, Draven watched with quiet pride, not because prophecy had been fulfilled, but because the woman standing beside him had chosen to be there of her own free will. "I am not standing here because of a mark," Lyra said, her voice steady and clear. "I am standing here because I choose to." The crowd fell silent, and then, slowly, respectful murmurs rose among the gathered wolves. Draven reached for her hand, and she let him take it, no longer afraid of what the future might hold. For the first time in her life, Lyra Nightshade did not have to hide who she was. And for the first time in years, Draven Ashvale allowed himself to trust in something beyond his own caution. Together, they faced whatever challenges still lay ahead, not as a prophecy fulfilled, but as two people who had found, against all odds, something worth choosing for themselves.